supposition. And that is that part of the problem that John was facing in whatever part of Christendom this book was first intended for had to be people who maybe were claiming that they knew it all. I have knowledge that, if you understood this, then you could be one of us. But since you don't, well, too bad. That kind of elitist put down. And is that addressed to that kind of thinking, saying, yeah, you think you know it all, but frankly, you aren't even asking the right questions. The other option is, because we keep running into this, the Jews, what we said about today, the whole of Jewish religion was defined as obedience. John talks about the Spirit. See? So here's your problem. You're still thinking like you were children when God had to give you a law and tell you what to do and not do because you were too dumb to know it yourself. But now you're grown up and you should be able to understand things, but you still won't. And it would have been nice if John, in his intro, had stated, this is written so that the idiots from such and such can finally get through, and the rest of you can stop listening to them, right? And perhaps it's enough of a situation like we face where there are all these truths being proclaimed, and there's so much of it that if you have a different thought, your first instinct is, I know they're dumb and crazy or whatever you feel, but why is it there's so many of them? You begin to doubt your own understanding. It's the missing piece to trying to decipher this. The other way, I think this is what most Christians would put to this, is we really are earthbound, and we try to make God that way. Right. And so God, the things we worship are things of this world. Right. Well, that won't get us there. So maybe we need to pay. Why is it we have such trouble understanding what John has Jesus say? We don't really, because see, we know it all.
A little bit of an oxymoron, kind of like a good politician.
Yeah. Right. I like how you brought up on this first day about, I had to say to you this. Oh, sorry. Yeah, now I see you are ready. Well, anyway, to my question about bringing up the I am, and this is something I brought up in Sunday school, we was talking about I am today. The first time we hear about this is back in Exodus, when God's telling Moses, you tell him that I am
sent you.
Is who I am. So, and he dwells on the 7 I am statements. I am the light of the world, I am the true vine, I am the bread of life. I can't take the letters. I know there's 7. So I just think that's something you don't really pick up on in the synoptic.
Well, and again, what is it John feels has to be addressed? The supposition is John is some distance from the synoptics. Those are out and about. He seems to follow at times Mark's order, but not words or simplicity. What is it that's happened that causes him to have to approach it in a different way? Mark, who doesn't even have a resurrection, and here's John, who has Jesus saying from the first word, I am. I'm not here to slowly get you to realize something. I'm telling you, I am. So something has happened in the movement that needs to be addressed. So why this strong, and we don't know what that was. We know, for example, that one of there were 2 main heresies that grew up in the church that it struggled with for centuries early on. And they're basically two different sides of the same thing. That Jesus wasn't divine, but was human. And the other side, Jesus wasn't really human, he was divine. Okay? So, and that's why if you want to find out, dig out a Apostles' Creed, and you'll find out which side the church said, no, this is what you believe. You know? The other thing that was so current in the culture of the time was the Greek love of wisdom, or knowledge, to the point that they admired wisdom / knowledge so much that it became a religion. And it's called Gnosticism. And and there's a lot in the Old Testament to support that. You know, God is all knowing, God is all seeing. You know, so therefore, what you're talking about is ultimately knowledge. And if you could have the mind of Christ, then the door is opened. Well, it also then became a secret. If you have the magic decoder ring that allows you to interpret this, then, and it's like John is like that. Well, you see, but you don't. Well, you hear, but you don't. You say you believe, but you don't. You understand, but you don't. You know, I know. Don't you wish you did too? I mean, that, yeah. So I got that all summed up is, it would be very helpful to our understanding of John to know what were the things that so troubled him that he felt had to be addressed. And the answer to that is, we can speculate, but we're just guessing. You know, and a lot of people just want to ignore that as a question and say, God wrote it, don't worry about it. Well, okay, but then why didn't he look at the first three Gospels and follow suit after that? And then, like I said last week and today, and then you get into these stories about individuals like the man born blind, and they are so well told. I mean, they're as good as Luke's stories, you know. And then the next chapter, well, you hear, but you aren't hearing. Yeah, I mean, you know, we're right back to the.
Doesn't that cause us to think about it a little bit more? I mean, rather than just being blunt, you know, he's the man. It kind of extends it out to where you can think about it some more.
Yeah.
And maybe study a little deeper in it.
See, if you take the story for today, chapter 9, just as it is, the testimony of the guy is really very limited. I started the day blind, and now I can see. In John's way of thinking, is you have transcended to a whole new level of existence. You can see who Jesus is, as in know who Jesus is, while the rest of you are standing around, how'd he do that? I mean, right? You know, I mean, we're asking the modern day question, well, how'd that happen? Or the real question is, what happened? Say, well, I can see. The real question that should have been asked this guy, and what is it that you see? You know, you can see, yeah, she's got a red sweater on. She's a tiger in hiding. Yeah. But what do you see? You know. Yeah. You see what I mean? I mean, that whole day, and it's that, and it's in his story, his acknowledgement, you know, of Jesus. But in the next chapter, he's standing around going, what is that guy saying? I follow him, but I'm listening, I just can't make sense out of it.
You still don't understand, right?
And the fortunate thing is John puts in enough sayings of Jesus in the midst of that it gives us a handle. You know, I am the light of the world. I can deal with that, you know. Yeah. Even though that's an abstract thought. By the way, for those of you who work with children, you say that to a child, what do they hear? I am the light of the world. Right? They live in a literal world, you know? Oh, Jesus is a light bulb. No, that's an abstract thought. Jesus is like a light bulb in that thing.
He lights the whole world, not just the light above you.
But are you talking about light? Or are you talking about insight? Understanding, see? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and if we give John credit in his writing, he's really trying to get us to think deeper, richer, rather than so simplistic. Now, how'd you get here? You know, and the real question is, we were watching and you were over there and a boat left and you weren't in it, and now the boat is here and you didn't come in it, but you're here. So where did you come from? And part of the answer that in the synoptic, Jesus would have said, how is that relevant? I mean, is that the most important question you've got today? Did you take a day off from work so you could come out here in the wilderness to ask, how did you get across the lake? See what, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how we are as humans.
Yeah.
We want to know that. Or
Yeah,
I
so,
do.
so
I'd
maybe
like
we
to-
only need to read the Gospel of John so that we at least trying to step up to, let's get beyond that. One of the worst things that happens in Bible studies is when we start explaining things. How you know, we talked about that with the feeding of the 5,000. Well, no Jew would go out without a little something in the pocket. And if everybody got out what they had, then nobody would need what was being passed around. That ain't the point. See? The story is not how to unlock the generosity of selfish people. Further input, questions, thoughts? So far, we've covered one day.
Well, jumping ahead there, chapter 10, and
Page.
verse 22. Well, it's page 39.
Yeah.
Not so much in the book as a question in Scripture. It says that it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication. It's
Hanukkah.
winter. Is that
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah?
Yeah.
Okay. I had that in mind. I got in here a note that I wrote in here. It dates back to the Maccabees. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am. The other thing the church never teaches you. Most popular name at the time of Jesus was what? Jesus is incorrect, by the way. We never said that. Judas.
Oh,
Judas Maccabeus. Drove the whatever they were. Forgot their name. What were they called? Anyway, out and recaptured Jerusalem and reinstated worship in the temple. And they lined the streets and they waved palms and they spread cloaks in his path and sang, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Didn't teach you that in Sunday school, did they? And Judas was that last great nationalistic hero. So when people are thinking we want a savior, we want someone to save us, Judas did, David did, Jesus, we're ready. We all got our AK-47s back there in the truck, and we're ready to go. Sound the trumpet.
talking about kind of what you said last week about that period, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, between the period of 63 and 166, or 166 to 63, I guess. I got a note in here that says Jewish independence, the Maccabees and the
Hasmoneans, yeah.
And what were they?
Isn't that the house of Herod?
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, the the Maccabees created an independent kingdom that had, what had conquered the area was the Alexander the Great, who promptly died.
Right.
Kingdom was divided up in his will, and they were a part of one of those sub-kingdoms.
That's where, is that where the 4 kings or something underneath him, like generals, come in and divide it, or have I got the wrong period? And they divided out
Yeah,
the empire?
I know very little about Alex, so,
Okay.
yeah. Well, and what happened is this particular guy, not the original one, but one of them, came along and realized that we had a Jewish problem.
Yeah.
And what we needed to do was to solve this Jewish problem. So the first thing we will do is we will outlaw Jewish religious observances. And so the Jews went underground. And to keep track of, someone watching while mom and dad are down in the basement or wherever having worship, is the kids would sit at the door and play a game called dreidel. And that way they could keep watch, and anybody coming by, see a bunch of kids playing. See? That's from the Maccabees, and that's the game that you play at Hanukkah. And you light the, yeah. So anyway, that goes, Judas, sets up this new kingdom, and everything is right with the Lord. And then, of course, he dies, and it's a natural kingdom, so his son, and somewhere down the road, there's a dispute about who is the king, so they call in a neutral arbitrator, Rome. And Rome solved the dispute and took over, yeah. I mean, so there's a natural extension of why things are at the time of Jesus the way they were, which is very much in the people's minds. And we in the church act like that never occurred. It doesn't have anything to do with us.
I mean, I hate to give you bum's rush, but it is 5 minutes after 12. I don't want you to miss your lunch.
Have an hour. How long does it take you to get food?
I don't know how proud of you are.
I'm not worried.
Okay.
Yet. I'll get worried later. Thank you, though. Yeah, and you just got through with the longest story, and by the end of this reading, you'll be into the next and the last of the witnesses, Lazarus.
I already asked more questions.
All right,
than I said I was
that's
going
fine.
to,
So you carrying the whole class by yourself.
No, I said I wasn't going to speak, but look what happened to that.
What always happens to us. Oh, I love you, Ollie. I just couldn't pass it up.
I figured the games would bring me out this weekend.
Yeah. It did put a little rawness on me. Just get that.
Okay, on page 17,
Help myself.
17.
I mean, day 17,
Oh, okay.
page 34.
Yeah.
Somewhere, I don't know, I wrote the example down, so I should go back and figure out why I have this example. Better ways to look to see how we are like them and pray to have faith enough, insight, courage to become different. And what in us is like them, meaning, I guess, the Jews. I would say anything, everything that we think makes life worthwhile that is not God. And then I was reminded of, there was a young basketball player who his high school went to state, whatever, first time ever. And there was, it was maybe with the snow or some weather that happened, and they had to cancel one day, and they moved the tournament to Sunday. He was Mormon, and he would not play. So, can you imagine the pressure he was under from his team? I mean, he's the top player. What do you mean you're not gonna play? That'll be okay with you, playing just for today. But his faith was more important to him, that he didn't work on Sunday.
How long ago was that?
It was now, I mean, I just
Oh,
read it.
really?
yeah,
Recently?
Recently, that's why I wrote it down in here. And I thought, how interesting.
Snow in March in the
Well,
West,
yeah.
you can't, that
I
never
think,
happens.
I think it was Utah, and I think that's why, I think he was Mormon.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Be
they're more
news if he
religious than the
wasn't.
rest of us. Yeah,
Are they carrying food? Looks like they are.
they're just gonna bring us, they're gonna serve us.
They could, you know, they could have
They
done.
could do that. Anyway. But I think we always find those things that it's hard to be different. You know, I mean, when we started the Logos ministry, when it started 40, 50 years ago, it was a midweek ministry on Wednesday night. Remember church on Wednesday night? People went to church on, and then life has changed.
Right.
And so the thing was that to be a part of that, you had to make a commitment to be there Wednesday night. Well, yeah, but my kid's got basketball practice. Have you talked to his coach? Well, no, we can't, because you know, if he can't come to practice, they won't let him play. Well, have you talked to his coach? You know, and I had stories of other people who the kid wouldn't talk to the coach, and coach said, fine, you can be late, or you can leave earlier. You know, but it's always like, well, we can't do it then. Or, well, you can't expect people to be there. On Sunday, you know, we'll do the same thing with, with some of our asking kids, we can't expect them to be there on Sunday. I mean, obviously, if they're a member of another church, no, that's fine, they are there on Sunday. But we now have all sorts of reasons why, well, it's okay, you know? When we grew up, if you weren't on, if you didn't go to church on Sunday, Mama didn't let you do anything else.
That's right.
But my goodness, but, so. That was my thought.
Was it?
Yeah.
So, are you able to do this daily, or are you like my wife who wakes up on Friday and realizes she hasn't done anything, and there's 5 days?
The first week I did it every day. It was kind of like, oh, we're doing Bible.
I think it was the second week. I crammed it in all on a Friday, and I thought, this is not working.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
We'll do better next week.
so I tried to do it every day,
It's easier daily.
along with when I'm studying Sunday school lessons.
See, what I'd learned was it takes you how many days to form a habit? And that if the study is shorter than that, you don't form a habit. Yeah. And you never have time to do this unless you make time. You know, and that just, yeah, I don't have time to do this. Yeah, you do. You just choose not to. Yeah.
Like exercise.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't like the things you write.
Oh,
If so, why do we seemingly ignore the depth of the calling, which is to be the presence of God's redeeming grace? Oh, me? You know, what do we, that's what we're called to be? Oh, to be like Jesus. Oh, okay. Where is the radical call upon us to be the very present light of God in the darkness of this world? Do we intentionally live our lives so that it offers a beacon of hope to all? To all. We're talking about
Yeah. I like the ticket to heaven there in the next paragraph.
yeah.
We had a lady in the church in Crawfordsville who was always, any study we had, she always took part. She always had the same question. But how do I know? How do you know what? If I'm going to make it or not? Betty. And, you know, if you wanted for your church participation to be the definition of what God expects of you, she's in. But you know, and I have yet to figure out what in her life so locked in that you, like it's almost a religion to not be sure, or not to presume, or to always be worried, or,
Pessimist,
pardon?
that be pessimistic?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. You know, I think she's aware that this is a high calling. It means to stand over and against the cultural expectations and assumptions. She knows that she both tries and fails, and but it always sounds like she doesn't trust grace, that she's still locked into earning, which is obedience. You got to pile up the goody points to overcome the negative points so you can get in. Yeah. Generations of evangelists have done a real number on us.
Well, when the Baptist knock on your door.
Yeah.
Have you been saved?
Yeah.
Well, when? What's the date?
Yeah.
You know, do you have it written in your Bible? My answer was on a cross 2,000 years ago.
Next question.
Yeah, can we move on now?
So, since you're so loquacious today, looking ahead, the last such session would be Easter, and we did a study like this last year, and I don't think we met Easter.
We didn't participate on Easter Sunday.
Okay.
How do you put that in? You just said sometimes.
Okay, so is that advocating that we do the same, or just observing that that's what we done did?
Because usually people have family
Yeah,
dinners
yeah,
or
okay.
something, so.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
And with sunrise breakfast that morning,
Yep, yep. Okay.
What is the timetable for how that's working on that Sunday?
9 o'clock, it's in your
9 o'clock
bulletin.
sunrise breakfast, there'll be no
Oh.
Sunday school.
Okay, 9 o'clock sunrise breakfast, and then go straight to the church. Okay,
No, you're already at the church.
well, you know,
Yes, the answer would be
I was
yes.
just trying to think,
Yeah.
do we need to drive down like we used to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning,
Oh,
and then you
no.
go back home, and then you come back and all that?
Yeah, you come down and you say, Christ the Lord is risen, and you go home, and then you come back for breakfast, and you go to church and say, Christ the Lord is risen. I
I'll just
don't have
follow
to be
your
in the
car.
dark and cold. Okay, good stuff. Keep reading, write questions, write in your notebook, put Post-it notes in, bring us something to chew on.